Hello everybody, welcome to another top 5 albums of the week. We have got a decent few entries this week, and one of them in particular I want to talk about is not going to be in the top 5. As usual, if it's a release that's come out beforehand from a previous point, either with remixed or remastered material and some new stuff, I don't really want to consider it into the top 5 because it's not really fair to have my favourite album of the week be one that's already out. I like it to be all new stuff. So I'm just going to put in the mentions. The first one I'll mention is the new 30-year anniversary of Ween's 12 Golden Country Greats, which is the band's country record they did after their successful record Chocolate and Cheese, and before the most iconic Ween record, The Mollusk. This album I've always thought was quite enjoyable. I'm not a country fan, but the humour, the Ween approach they take to these songs is what really drew me in. Some major highlights is Mr. Richard Smoker, I Don't Leave You on the Farm, Piss Up a Rope, Powder Blue. There's definitely a lot of good stuff on here, but the fact that we now have all these songs remastered, we have all the demos, as well as some other demos as well from newest unreleased stuff. We also then had a bunch of new tracks we have either never heard of or heard only snippets of from weaker recordings. Now we actually have all these songs. I loved Bad Day in Brownsville as a single, Boston Chicken another great single, So Long Jerry was also really good as well, but then the album came out and we had some amazing tracks like the Fool to Cry cover of Rolling Stones, good rhyme time song, whatever the name is, which is just so ridiculously funny. Maybell is quite cool to hear the Waste version. I Ain't Got No Dark Side. There's so many cool things here that it's honestly, every day we have a whole release like this, it just feels like Ween's released a new record, but it is just a bunch of stuff that's officially out there, and thanks to Rhino Records for doing this because it's pretty nice. But yeah, this came out and I thought I'd give it a mention. Definitely fun, worth the listen. Other honorable mentions, we have the new one by Five Finger Death Punch, Legacy. There is no way that this was going to be in the top 5 because it's weak. It's Five Finger Death Punch doing the exact same thing we've heard again and again. Some of the kind of poppy elements seeping here and there. The very mainstream generic metal sound they've always been doing hasn't changed. I've honestly found this just feels like my listen of And Justice for None, a 2018 record. They have not really changed their sound and have continued just to do kind of the same gimmick over and over again that's never really worked, so I don't know why this is a continuation, but yeah, this is basically just Five Finger Death Punch, boring as shit, and the fact they used AI for the album art is pretty awful. I mean, come on, how? Like, remember when they did the deluxe edition of Injustice for None, and all they did was take one of those images you see from the skeleton meme with the guns from the Rat Pack sort of era and just edit on it. Like, even that was better than AI, but I don't know. This is just a terrible era, and I don't think Five Finger Death Punch are ever going to be climbing back up into quality. This is just a band that's just known to do the same thing, and it just blows, to be honest. The new one by Alt, Ataraxia, I think the album is. Alt's debut I thought was decent. I thought it had some really fun energy they're bringing to the table. I honestly feel like Alt could have had a really strong thing going, what they bring, but then they decided for the second album to just lean into a more Bad Omens sounding album with a bit more of that metalcore sound that Bad Omens is pretty much removed entirely from their own sound. I don't like this approach at all. Some of the cleans as well I just don't think are quite as good as they could be. I feel like some of it just feels very forced. A lot of the elements of this record just kind of blows, in my opinion. It feels so predictable and just does what we've heard before from artists like I mentioned, Bad Omens, and it's disappointing. Alt had a lot of hype going into it, and it's one of those bands where a lot of people in the metalcore community were just looking forward to them. They were just like, they were pretty much had so much hype that they could have been on top of the metalcore regime, but unfortunately this album, I think, kind of scared people off away. It's a disappointment, but I mean, Alt could have just experimented, had a lousy experiment, and then kind of tried for something different next record, but I don't know. I just feel like this is every way a downgrade from their previous, and I wasn't even that big on their debut, so this is not really for me, unfortunately. And the last one we have is Disfiguring the Goddess, Bloom, some slam death metal here, very aggressive, very fun deathcore mix into it. But then I kind of get tiresome from the fact there's 17 tracks. So the cool thing about this album is it does have a few features, and it has 2 features from Four Strokes Baron, which I think is interesting to get a prog metal outfit like that on here, but I think 17 tracks of this just gets over the top in my opinion. It just really dragged on this album, and by the time we got to the end I was just so bored. I just felt like it had potential and it should have just been shortened. It should have at least been 10 tracks, 7 of them I don't think really needs to exist. Alright, now we're in the top 5. So number 5 we have Opus Kink, The Sweet Goodbye. Opus Kink is an art sort of punk, jazz punk blend, and I think what I like about this is that the vocals are a very nice grain of aggression into its grittier delivery to its kind of more dramatized, loud, fun aspect. It kind of reminds me of Maruja a bit when it comes to it, especially with all the jazz influence to it. Matter of fact, I do think a lot of similarities draw to that as well, but I think as a whole the album, it does have enough unique things to make it stand out. I think this is their debut, if I'm correct, and it's pretty decently solid for a debut. I do feel like the strongest stuff you already hear at the start, and towards the end it kind of does a similar thing for the rest of the record, but I do appreciate what they go for here. It's kind of a nice little change of pace, because a lot of the stuff here is pretty much prog metal, metalcore, post-hardcore, and yeah, I think this is kind of a nice blend to have that on. So Opus Kink, yeah, this was a decently good record. Number 4 we have Fractal Sun, Divergent Paradox. There's a lot of good vocal performance on this one, although I do feel like sometimes it got to levels of being a little bit obnoxious, especially on the first track and the opening. As soon as I heard the vocal I was like, oh my god, this is going to be one of those records. But once it kind of chills out a bit onto the really high screeching delivery, I just feel like it kind of got a bit jarring at first. It does click into a pretty good direction for the rest of the record. It's got some great prog metal elements. I love the kind of alternative sound and ideas they bring to it. I think as a whole the album has a lot of ambitious ideas, and I am curious to see how they expand upon that in the next release. This one was pretty decent. At number 3 we have Nothingness, Godslaughter. So Nothingness is kind of a fun death metal blend, and this album is pretty decent. I think it's got some great potential, it's consistent, it's not an album I'm hugely big on, but I think for what it brings and what it adds, it's a very strong listen for those who are really into this sort of sound. I think for me, even though I'm not as big on it as I should be, I think I could still respect the amount of effort put into this one. It's got some great guitar work. I think the absolute monstrous vocals on here are very nice. This album is definitely worthy of being in the top 5. At number 2 we have As Bright as the Stars, Celestial Ascension. Probably the least popular thing on this list, because I think when I checked they had about like 400 monthly listeners. I just remember seeing this one mentioned somewhere and thought I'd give it a listen, because there wasn't really much that I knew about on this top 5. I think looking at it, there's like 3 or 4 artists I've heard of in this entire video, and a lot of them I just never did. This is definitely one of them I've never heard of. This is kind of a post-metal, black metal, not black metal, black gaze, post-rock blend. I think it starts off really fun and strong. Like, as production goes, it's pretty good for a small artist and what it offers for. Not the dreamiest sound, but I think it's got some good elements to it. Kind of reminds me of atmospheric black metal more, but I think it's a good blend. I feel like there's a lot of cool ideas they bring, but it does lose its kind of charm a bit once you get into like the 3rd or 4th track. I think it does have very consistent performance quality, but songwriting wise, I do feel like this album is more, again, a theme I've noticed is front loaded. It's not just because I'm listening to the first few songs and ignoring the rest, but I just noticed the patterns. It seems to be like you get into something and you want to see if it holds towards the end sort of approach. And I do think the last track is probably the best song, but the journey between it kind of dips in the middle, but I feel like there's still a lot of great stuff that I felt like this was the best place to put it. And finally, number one, I was surprised by this because I've never really thought of myself to say this band is probably the best of the week, but Future Palace Resurgence. I remember reviewing the 2024 record and thought, yeah, it was good, but wasn't impressed with it, and I guess it's the exact same thing I have with this record. I wouldn't say it's like that impressive, but I mean, this week's sort of been very okay again. We need to have some stronger weeks, I feel, because we're just kind of getting a lot of alright good stuff, I suppose. But Future Palace tops this week with a pretty fun performance. I'm going to be honest and say that this album has got highs that beats the previous record, and I say it's more consistent too. It doesn't quite have the charm of some of the songs from the previous record has, especially the track that features Charlie Rolfe from As Everything Unfolds, but I feel like what we get with Future Palace here is a very consistent, fun blend into that kind of hard, kind of like post-hardcore mix into alt metal blend here, and I think it sounds pretty solid. Great performance. I like the production on this one as well. Yeah, I just think this one was the best of this week, and that's what I have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next week, where I'll be talking about a few records, especially Electric Callboy. That's one I've been waiting for a while, although we've only had 2 new songs for it, and there's a few other things as well, but that's the one that mainly comes to the top of my head. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.